The night market on the alien world was full of strange lights and darker shadows. Merchants shouted in unknown tongues, offering weapons, rare metals, and creatures from forgotten planets. The air smelled of smoke, oil, and fear. Everywhere, cages stood in long rows, each filled with beings who had lost their freedom. Most travelers walked past without care, their eyes cold, their pockets heavy with credits. The slaves were nothing but objects to them, things to sell, things to trade, things to break. But in the middle row, in a cage covered with rust and glowing locks, sat a girl unlike the others. Her skin shimmered faintly, as if touched by starlight, and her eyes glowed weakly, holding both pain and hope. She was chained to the floor, her wrists bound with energy cuffs that hummed with low light, her head hung down, her long hair hiding her face. Most aliens did not even look at her, because they had already judged her as broken. But then, something happened that no one noticed. The girl whispered, her lips moving softly, almost without sound. To most ears, it was nothing, just a broken voice lost in the crowd. But one traveler stopped, his head turning sharply as if struck by lightning. He was a human, tall, tired from long travels, wearing a coat that had seen too many storms. He stood frozen, his heart pounding, because he had heard her voice. It was not a normal voice, not even a normal cry. It was a desperate call, raw and sharp, as if it had pierced through space itself. It reached his soul, burning inside him, demanding an answer. The human looked around, waiting to see if others had reacted, but the crowd moved on, blind and deaf, ignoring the chained girl. None of the aliens showed a single sign that they had heard anything. The human realized, with shock, that the cry was meant only for him. He took a slow step closer to the cage, the girl's head lifted, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a moment, everything around them grew silent, as if the world itself held its breath. Her lips moved again, and this time he could understand. "Help me," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was not in human language, not in any tongue he knew, yet somehow his mind understood. It felt like her words reached him directly, through thought and feeling. The human's chest tightened, because she was speaking to him and him alone. He knelt near the cage, his fingers brushing the cold bars. The energy chains pulsed brighter, as if warning him to stay away. The girl flinched back, her body weak, but her eyes begged him not to leave. Around them, the noise of the market continued, but in his ears there was only silence, and her cry, the human's thoughts raced. Why him? Why now? Why her? There were hundreds of slaves, but this one girl had reached his soul, and he could not turn away. Not when her voice kept echoing inside him. "Please," she whispered again, her words breaking like glass. The human felt anger rise in him, anger at the guards who laughed nearby, anger at the aliens who treated life like property, but most of all, anger at himself, because he knew the choice before him was dangerous. He could walk away, pretend he had never heard her voice. He could vanish into the crowd, safe and unnoticed, but the sound of her cry would never leave him. It would haunt him forever, and deep inside, something human, something stubborn, refused to abandon her. He took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing with decision. The girl saw the change in him, and for the first time, a faint spark of hope lit in her eyes. Her chains rattled softly, as if sensing the possibility of freedom. The human whispered back, so quiet that only she could hear. "I hear you," he said, his voice steady. "I will not leave you." At that moment, the world around them came back alive. The guards shouted, merchants laughed, coins clattered, but the human no longer heard the noise. His mind was fixed only on the girl in the cage, the cry in his soul, and the dangerous path he had chosen. The market lights flickered, the shadows grew darker. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the alien sky. The story of one human and one alien girl had begun, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The human stood near the cage, his hands clenched and his breath heavy. He had heard the cry, he had seen the girl's glowing eyes, and he had made a promise. But now, as the market lights flickered and the alien guards moved closer, doubt crept into his mind. Was he ready to risk everything for a stranger, a girl whose very existence was wrapped in mystery? He stepped back into the crowd, his heart pounding louder than the noise of the marketplace. The girl's voice still echoed inside his head, soft but unshakable. Everywhere around him, aliens bargained, shouted, and traded without care. No one noticed him, no one cared about the chained girl, no one heard her cries. He tried to breathe slowly, to calm himself, but the thoughts came sharp and fast. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, seen as weak, seen as reckless. If he tried to interfere, the guards would cut him down without hesitation. If he failed, both he and the girl would die in chains, forgotten forever. He walked toward a stall selling alien fruit, pretending to browse. His eyes kept drifting back to the cage, the way her hands shook, the way her eyes begged. Inside him, two voices fought for control. One voice said, "Walk away, it is not your problem, she is not your fight." The other voice said, "If you walk away now, you will never forgive yourself. Not in this life, not in any." He remembered old words spoken long ago, words from his father on Earth. Humans are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced, but we are the ones who cannot ignore suffering. The memory cut deep, stirring something fierce inside him. He realized the dilemma was not just about survival, it was about identity, about what it meant to be human. The girl's chains glowed faintly, as if mocking him for hesitating. The guards laughed, their voices harsh, sharp, full of cruelty. He could almost hear them in his head. "Foolish human, you will die if you try. You are nothing here." But in the girl's eyes, there was a silent trust, as if she already knew he would not abandon her. The human cursed under his breath, his fists tightening. He imagined himself leaving, boarding his ship, flying far away. Yet even in that picture, the sound of her cry followed him, haunting him. He knew he would see her face in every shadow, hear her voice in every silence. His stomach twisted with fear, because he knew the truth. There was no escape from this choice. He had already chosen the moment he heard her. Still, fear is a heavy chain, and doubt tried to pull him down. He wondered, what if this is a trap? What if she is not what she seems? What if saving her means the end of me? But then he remembered the way she whispered, fragile and desperate. There was no trick in her voice, no deception in her tears. It was pure pain, pure need, the kind that cuts through lies. And the human realized, sometimes truth is not in words, but in the heart. He looked at his hands, scarred from past fights, scarred from mistakes. How many times had he promised himself not to interfere again? How many times had he said he would only look after himself? And yet here he was, standing on the edge of another storm. A voice in his mind mocked him, "You will die for nothing, human." But another voice whispered, "Or you will live for something greater." That whisper felt heavier than fear, brighter than doubt, and for the first time, he allowed himself to hope. He leaned against a wall, his eyes locked on the cage across the market. He began to study the guards, their patterns, their weapons, their lazy movements. His mind worked quickly, human instincts piecing together possibilities. Perhaps he could create a distraction. Perhaps he could break the locks. Perhaps he could steal her away into the night, but the risk was massive, the punishment certain if he failed. Death was not the worst thing. Failure meant she would suffer more because of him. That thought cut him deeper than fear of death ever could, and it was then he understood. The dilemma was not about him, it was about her. Would he allow her suffering to continue while he walked free, or would he risk everything to end it, even if it meant his own end? He thought of Earth, of home, of people who once fought impossible battles, not because they were easy, but because they were right. The memory gave him strength, the kind only humans carry, the kind born from stubborn hope. The girl's eyes found his again, even across the crowded market. For a second, it felt like there were no guards, no merchants, no chains, only her and him, connected by a silent promise. He nodded slightly, a small motion, but her lips parted in surprise, as if she understood. The human straightened his coat, his eyes sharp with new fire. The fear was still there, yes, but it was no longer his master. The choice was made, the path was clear, the risk was his to carry. And in that moment, the human's dilemma ended, replaced by resolve. He whispered to himself, words no one else could hear. "If no one else will help her, then I will, even if it kill. Save me." The marketplace roared with life. The guards laughed louder, the lights burned bright. But in the heart of one human, silence fell. The silence before a storm. The human had made his choice. The weight of it pressed heavy on his chest, but his heart was steady. The market still roared with alien voices. The smell of burning oil and smoke filled the air. The guards laughed and leaned lazily on their strange weapons. The girl in the cage sat quietly, her glowing eyes locked on him, her chains humming with low power. No one else noticed the silent bond between them. No one else cared. He moved through the crowd with slow steps, blending in, pretending to be another traveler. He kept his eyes low, but his mind was sharp, studying every detail, every shadow, every gap in the guard's attention. Years of wandering strange worlds had taught him patience, and now patience was his weapon. He had no army, no advanced weapons, only human cunning and courage. The cage stood in the center row, guarded by two large reptilian soldiers with scaled skin and glowing armor. They carried plasma spears that hummed with deadly light, their faces cruel and full of boredom. To them, guarding a weak chained girl was nothing but routine, a task too easy to respect. The human saw that weakness, and he planned to use it. He reached into his worn coat and pulled out a small device, a simple tool he had repaired countless times. It was nothing compared to alien technology, but in his hands, it was enough. He crouched near a stall of mechanical parts, pretending to inspect scrap. His fingers worked quickly, connecting wires, adjusting circuits, his mind racing with ideas. A spark flashed, a low hum began, and the device was ready. It was a sound emitter, crude but powerful. It could mimic the cry of a wild beast. The human smiled faintly because he knew fear was a weapon stronger than sight. He placed the device under a pile of metal and tapped the trigger. A terrible roar filled the market, deep and echoing, like a predator from the forgotten jungles. Aliens jumped in surprise, merchants shouted, children screamed, chaos rippled through the crowd. The guards near the cage snapped to attention, their eyes wide, scanning the shadows for danger. They barked orders in their harsh tongue, their spears glowing brighter as they prepared for attack. But the human did not wait. He slipped into the smoke and shadows, moving closer to the cage. His heart pounded like a drum, but his steps were quiet, careful, like a hunter stalking prey. The girl's eyes widened when she saw him appear near the bars. Her lips parted, but he quickly raised a finger to his lips, a silent command for silence. He reached for the lock, his hand steady despite the danger. The lock glowed with strange alien energy, its symbols shifting like living fire. It was designed to resist strength, to resist force, but not to resist human persistence. He pulled out a small tool from his belt, something simple, something sharp, and began to work. The lock hissed, sparks danced, the energy pulsed angrily against his efforts. Every second felt like a lifetime. Every sound in the crowd felt like a threat. The girl held her breath, her chains rattling softly, her eyes full of both fear and hope. The human whispered, his voice low, "Stay still, almost there." One of the guards turned suddenly, his nostrils flaring, his eyes narrowing. The human froze, his body hidden in the shadow of the cage. The guard stepped forward, suspicious, his spear humming louder. But then the device roared again from the far side of the market, and the guard spun around, distracted once more. The human exhaled slowly, sweat dripping down his brow. His tool sparked one last time, and the lock gave a sharp click. The glow dimmed, the chains loosened. The door creaked open just enough for each to escape. The girl gasped softly, her eyes shining with gratitude and fear. He pulled the door wide, reached out his hand and whispered firmly, "Come with me." For a heartbeat she hesitated, staring at him as if testing his resolve. Then with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. The chains around her wrists flickered weakly, as if the act of trust itself broke part of their strength. Together, they slipped from the cage into the sea of chaos. The crowd pushed and pulled, merchants shouted, guards roared. The roar of the device still echoed. The human moved quickly, shielding her with his body, guiding her through the madness. For the first time in years, the girl was outside her prison, free but hunted. The guards finally realized the trick. Their furious shouts rose above the crowd. One pointed toward the human, another raised his spear. The chase had begun. The human tightened his grip on her hand, his voice sharp and steady. "Run, do not stop, no matter what." Her eyes widened with fear, but she nodded, trusting him completely. They dashed through the market, weaving between stalls, knocking over tables, scattering coins and goods. The crowd became part of their cover. Angry merchants blocked guards. Frightened shoppers screamed and fled. The human's heart raced, but his mind was clear. Every step a choice, every turn a chance. This was no longer a plan. It was survival, raw and desperate. Behind them, guards shouted, plasma spears cracked, beams of light cut through the smoke. The girl stumbled once, but the human caught her, pulling her back to her feet without slowing. He whispered again, "Do not look back, only forward." The cage was gone. The choice was made. The rescue had begun. The market lights flickered once more. Shadows stretched across the walls. Somewhere in the chaos, the sound emitter burned out, its final roar fading into silence. Now it was only them, two figures running through fire and fear, one human, one alien girl, chased by a galaxy that did not want them free. The night sky above the alien city burned with strange colors, neon lights mixing with the glow of distant moons. The human and the alien girl slipped into the narrow alleys, their breaths quick, their footsteps soft, their hearts racing. Behind them, the market was still in chaos, guards shouting, merchants cursing, alarms ringing through the smoke. But here, in the maze of shadows, they had a moment of silence, a moment to breathe, a moment to face the truth. The girl leaned against a cracked wall, her body trembling, her wrists still bound by glowing cuffs. The human crouched beside her, his eyes sharp, his breath heavy, sweat dripping down his face. He whispered, "You are free from the cage, but not from the chains." She lifted her hands, the cuffs burning faintly, humming like living fire. He reached to touch them, but the moment his fingers brushed the metal, pain shot through his hand. He hissed and pulled back, the smell of burnt flesh rising from his skin. The chains glowed brighter, as if mocking him, as if warning him. The girl shook her head, whispering, "They cannot be broken by force. They were made to hold me forever." The human frowned, his mind racing. He had seen alien weapons, alien prisons, alien tricks, but these cuffs felt different, older, stronger, almost alive. He pulled out his tools, wires, and scraps, trying to study the symbols carved into the glowing surface. The symbols shifted like liquid, changing shape, refusing to be understood. The girl's eyes followed him, her voice soft but full of fear. "They burn the soul as much as the body. If you break them the wrong way, they will consume me." The human froze, his tool hovering just above the cuff. His jaw tightened, because he realized this was no simple lock. This was a puzzle made of pain and secrets. He asked, "Why would they chain you with something like this? Why not simple iron? Why not simple steel?" The girl lowered her head, her voice trembling. "Because I am not simple," she whispered. "I carry something inside me they fear, something they cannot destroy, so they bind it instead." Her words struck him like a storm, the weight of them heavy and terrifying. The human stared at her glowing eyes, searching for lies, but he found none. She was telling the truth, or at least the truth she knew, and suddenly, her chains were no longer just chains. They were a sign, a symbol, a warning of what she was. He felt his heart tighten, because saving her was no longer just about freedom, it was about destiny. He tried again, carefully this time, placing a small probe against the cuff. The energy sparked, flaring like lightning, throwing him back against the wall. The girl cried out, the chains tightening, burning brighter, feeding on her pain. The human scrambled back to her side, gripping her shoulders, whispering, "I'm sorry, hold on, I will not give up." Her breathing slowed, her body weak, but her eyes did not look away. In them, he saw trust, fragile but real, trust that he would find a way. It scared him because he did not know if he could, but it also gave him strength. Strength to try again, strength to believe that human stubbornness was enough. He studied the cuffs for a long time, ignoring the sounds of distant guards, ignoring the ache in his burned hands. He noticed that when she moved, the symbols shifted. When she breathed, the glow pulsed with her heartbeat. The chains were not just metal. They were connected to her, alive through her. Breaking them was not about force. It was about understanding. He whispered, half to her, half to himself. "They are feeding on you, drawing power from you. That is why no alien could break them." The girl nodded weakly, whispering back, "But you are different, you are human. I do not know why, but your touch weakens them, even if it hurts you." The human looked at his burned hand, the skin raw but the pain fading. He clenched his fist, muttering, "Then pain is the price I will pay." He placed both hands firmly on the cuffs, ignoring the fire that spread through his nerves. The chains flared, trying to resist, but this time he held on, his jaw locked, his will unbroken. The girl gasped, her body shaking, her voice breaking as she whispered his name, though he had never told it. And in that strange moment, human and alien were connected, not by words, not by chains, but by shared pain and shared defiance. The cuffs cracked faintly, a thin line of light splitting across their surface. The human felt his strength draining, his vision blurring, but he pushed harder. His voice growled through clenched teeth. "You will not hold her, not while I breathe." The chains screamed, a sound like metal and thunder, before fading back to their glow. Unbroken but weakened, he fell back, gasping, his hands blackened and trembling. The girl rushed to his side, her own body shaking, her eyes full of something new. Not just fear, not just hope, but awe. She whispered, "No one has ever weakened them before, only you." The human met her gaze, his chest rising and falling. He felt the truth of her words, and it filled him with both pride and dread, because if the chains feared him, then those who forged them would soon fear him too, and the galaxy was already beginning to change. Far away, horns sounded in the streets. Heavy footsteps echoed closer. The guards had found their trail. The girl tightened her chains, wincing as they pulled against her skin. The human stood, his body weak but his spirit burning. The mystery of the chains was only beginning, and with it came a storm neither of them could escape. The sound of horns rolled through the alien streets, heavy and sharp like the call of war. The human and the alien girl looked at each other, their silence heavy with one truth. They had been found. Shadows moved in the alleys, the glow of plasma spears cutting through. Oh, the darkness. The guards were coming, and this time there would be no hesitation, no mercy. The girl tried to stand, her chains rattling, her body trembling from weakness. The human grabbed her arm, steadying her, his burned hands still aching but his grip strong. He whispered, "We run now, no turning back." She nodded, her eyes wide but full of trust. They sprinted through the narrow alleys, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. The city was alive with alarms, red lights flashing above towers, alien voices shouting commands in every direction. The human pulled the girl close, guiding her through twists and turns, always searching for shadows to hide in. But the sound of pursuit grew louder. The guards were fast, their armor clanking with each step. The girl stumbled, her chains dragging against the ground, sparks flying with each scrape. The human tightened his grip on her hand, pulling her forward, his voice sharp. "Do not stop. Do not look back." Behind them, plasma beams struck the walls, burning holes into stone, sending debris crashing into the alleys. The chase was no longer a secret. The entire city now knew something had escaped. They burst into a wider street filled with alien merchants who screamed and scattered. Some tried to block the way, hoping for reward from the guards. But the human shoved them aside. His coat tore, his boots slid against the slick ground. But he never slowed. Every breath burned in his chest, but his will burned hotter. The guards emerged from the shadows, their spears glowing like lightning, their roars shaking the street. One hurled a spear, the beam slicing through the air. The human yanked the girl down just in time, the weapon exploding against a wall in a flash of fire. The crowd panicked, rushing in every direction, turning the chase into chaos. The human used the confusion, weaving through bodies, pulling the girl behind him. Merchants cursed, goods toppled, stalls collapsed, fruit and metal scattered across the ground. The guards struggled to push through the crowd, their fury growing with each delay. But the human knew their anger was his chance. Every second mattered. They ducked into another alley, darker, tighter, the smell of oil and smoke heavier. The girl gasped for breath, her chains rattling, her voice soft. "You should leave me. I am slowing you down." The human stopped, his eyes blazing, his voice fierce. "I will not leave you, not ever." For a moment, the girl stared at him, and though fear still lived in her eyes, something brighter flickered there too. The sound of metal boots grew near again. The guards were relentless. The human pressed his back to the wall, pulling the girl close, waiting. When the first guard appeared at the alley's mouth, the human acted fast. He hurled a broken pipe he had picked up, striking the guard's helmet with a sharp clang. The guard stumbled, roaring in anger. The human grabbed the girl's hand, rushing deeper into the maze of alleys. The chase twisted like a serpent, every turn a new danger, every shadow a possible trap. The human's mind raced, searching for a way out, a path to safety. Finally, they reached the edge of the city, where tall walls rose high into the night. The gates were locked, guarded by heavy machines and armored soldiers. Escape through them was impossible, but the human saw something else. A drainage tunnel half hidden in shadow, small, narrow, but open. He pointed, whispering, "There, we can make it." The girl's chains rattled, her voice weak but certain. "If we reach it, we will not be caught." They dashed across the empty ground, the sound of horns echoing behind them, the glow of spears closing in. The tunnel was only a few steps away. But those steps felt longer than a lifetime. A spear struck the ground near them, exploding in fire, throwing them off balance. The girl fell, her chains dragging her down, her cry sharp with pain. The human dropped beside her, shielding her with his body as fire rained around them. His hands burned, his lungs screamed, but he pulled her up again, his voice a growl. "Move!" They dove into the tunnel just as another blast tore the ground behind them. The narrow walls closed around them, the sound of pursuit muffled but still close. The tunnel was dark, wet, and foul, but it was freedom. The human led the way, the girl crawling close behind, the sound of her chains echoing in the dark. The guards shouted outside, their voices furious, their boots pounding the ground, but the tunnel was too small for their size, too tight for their armor. For now, the human and the girl had escaped their grasp. But the chase was not over. It had only just begun. At the end of the tunnel, faint light glimmered. The open world beyond the city walls. The human crawled faster, pulling the girl through the darkness, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. The night air waited for them, vast and wild, full of danger but also full of possibility. Behind them, the city roared with anger. Ahead of them, the unknown stretched wide. The girl whispered softly, her voice trembling, "Why do you keep risking your life for me?" The human glanced back, his face shadowed but his eyes burning. "Because if I do not, no one will," he answered, his voice steady, even in exhaustion, and those words carried them forward into the night, into freedom, into the next storm that was waiting for them. The night stretched wide beyond the city walls. The stars above shone like silent watchers. The human and the alien girl stumbled out of the tunnel, their clothes torn, their bodies weak, their breaths sharp. Behind them, the city burned with alarms, horns still calling, lights still searching. But for now, they had escaped. The human guided her toward a patch of tall rocks, hidden by shadows, a place where they could rest, if only for a moment. The girl collapsed against the stone, her chains glowing faintly, her skin pale under the starlight. The human crouched beside her, scanning the horizon for movement, his ears sharp for footsteps. Silence covered the land, but it was a silence heavy with danger, the kind that waits before striking. He turned back to her, whispering, "They are chasing us. But why are they so desperate? What is it about you?" Her eyes lifted to meet his, glowing softly like moons caught in tears. For a long moment she said nothing, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then, with a trembling breath, she whispered, "You deserve the truth because you have risked everything for me." The human leaned closer, his eyes narrowing, waiting. She raised her chained hands, the symbols shifting across the cuffs. "These chains are not only to hold me, they are to hold what is inside me," she said, her voice breaking. The human frowned, confusion and unease flickering across his face. "What is inside you?" he asked, his tone sharp. The girl looked toward the stars, her voice soft but steady. "My people were once rulers of this galaxy, long before your kind even walked on Earth. We were called the Illyrians, beings of light and energy, feared and worshipped for our power. But power breeds enemies, and we were betrayed, hunted, chained, until only fragments of us remained." The human's heart thudded in his chest, the weight of her words heavy as stone. She continued, "I am the last child of Illyria, hidden, captured, and bound, because inside me lies the spark of our ancient force. It cannot be destroyed, only contained, and the chains are the key to that prison." Her hands trembled, the glow of the cuffs pulsing with each word. The human stared at her, disbelief mixing with awe. He whispered, "So you are not just a girl in chains. You are something more, something the galaxy fears." She nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes, but there is more." Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "My people believed that only one race in the future could free us, only one race with the strange ability to touch our essence without being destroyed." The human leaned forward, his breath caught, her gaze locked onto his, her words sharp and unshakable. "That race is humanity, and you are the proof, because your hands weakened the chains when no other being could." The human froze, his burned hands tingling as if the chains remembered him. He wanted to deny it, wanted to believe he was just an ordinary man. But the memory of the glowing cracks in the cuffs returned, the way her pain lessened when he touched them. He realized her words were not hope, they were truth. The girl whispered, "Do you see now why they hunt me, why they fear me, why they fear you? If I am freed, if the spark inside me is unleashed, it could change the balance of the galaxy forever." Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with fire. "They would rather see me in chains forever than risk the return of Illyria." The human's mind raced, the truth pounding like a storm inside him. He had not wanted destiny. He had only wanted to survive, but now destiny had found him. He looked at her, at the fragile yet unbreakable strength in her gaze, and he knew there was no turning back. The wind howled across the rocks, carrying the distant sound of horror. "Ends." The human clenched his fists, his voice steady. "Then we will not let them win. We will break the chains no matter the cost." The girl's lips parted in shock, then curved into a faint smile, the first real smile he had seen from her. "You speak like one of my people," she whispered. "But you are more. You are human, and that makes you different." They sat in silence for a moment, the stars watching, the ground trembling faintly with the march of distant soldiers. The truth between them was heavy but clear. Her secret was no longer hers alone, it belonged to them both. The human's choice had grown larger than himself, larger than Earth, larger than survival. It was now a choice that carried the weight of galaxies. The girl lifted her chained wrists again, the glow softer now. Her voice was gentle, but it carried the weight of prophecy. "Only you can free me. Only you can decide if Illyria rises again or fades forever." The human's breath caught, his chest tight with the burden of fate. He reached out, his fingers brushing the glowing metal despite the burn. The chains flared in anger, sparks flying, but this time he did not pull away. His eyes locked onto hers, his voice firm. "Then I will find the way, no matter how long it takes." The girl's eyes widened, her tears shimmering like stars, and she whispered, "Then hope lives again." The night grew darker, the horns louder, the footsteps nearer, But the truth had been spoken, and it could not be undone. The human and the alien girl were no longer just fugitives. They were carriers of a secret that could shatter empires, and the galaxy would stop at nothing to silence them. The ground shook under heavy footsteps, the sound of armored soldiers moving closer. The horns of the city wailed like the cries of beasts, warning all who listened that fugitives were loose. The human stood tall beside the alien girl, his body a key. His hands burned but his spirit unbroken. The girl's chains glowed faintly in the moonlight, reminding both of them of the burden they carried. They had run, they had fought, they had survived, but now the chase had ended at the edge of the world. Before them stretched an open wasteland of stone and ash. Behind them marched soldiers with glowing spears. The human tightened his grip on the girl's hand, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "This is where we stand, no more running." The girl trembled, her voice weak but her eyes fierce. "You cannot fight them all, you will die." The human looked at her, his expression hard, his jaw set. "Then I will die standing, but I will not let them take you back." The soldiers appeared from the shadows, their armor shining, their weapons raised. Their leader, taller than the rest, pointed his spear and roared, "Return the prisoner, human, or we will burn you where you stand." The night filled with the sound of crackling plasma, a wall of fire ready to fall. The human stepped forward, placing himself between the girl and the soldiers. His voice rang out, strong and defiant. "If you want her, you will go through me." The soldiers laughed, their cruel voices echoing across the wasteland. One sneered, "A human thinks he can stop us, weak flesh against steel and flame." The girl's chains pulsed, the glow brighter now, responding to her fear and her hope. She clutched her chest, her voice trembling. "I cannot control it. The spark inside me, it is waking." The human turned, his eyes wide, but he did not step away. "Then let it wake, let it rise, I will not fear it." The soldiers charged, their spears blazing with deadly light. The human braced himself, picking up a broken metal rod from the ground. It was no match for their weapons, but in his grip it became more than steel. It became will. He swung as the first soldier struck, sparks flying as metal clashed with energy. The impact threw him back, pain lancing through his body. But he stood again, blood on his lip, fire in his eyes. He roared like a beast, striking again, forcing the soldiers to step back. For a moment, the unstoppable army hesitated, faced with the fury of one human. The girl's chains cracked faintly, light spilling through the glowing cuffs. Her voice broke as she cried, "Stop! They will kill you! I cannot watch you die for me!" The human turned his head, his face fierce, his voice sharp as steel. "I told you already, I will not leave you, not ever." The soldiers regrouped, their leader stepping forward with a roar. He thrust his spear, the beam cutting through the air toward the human's chest. But before the strike could land, the girl screamed, a sound not of pain but of power. The chains shattered with a blinding light, fragments of glowing metal scattering into the night. The ground shook, the air trembled, the sky itself seemed to bend. From the girl's body poured a wave of radiant energy, bright as 1,000 suns. The soldiers staggered, their armor cracking, their weapons failing under the storm. The human shielded his eyes, his body trembling from the force. When the light faded, the girl stood tall, no longer weak, no longer chained. Her eyes burned like twin stars. Her voice rang with the echo of ages. "I am Illyrian, last child of my people, and I am free." The soldiers froze, their faces twisted with fear, their leader stumbling back. The human stared at her, awe and fear mixing in his chest. She looked at him, her fierce power softening, her voice tender. "And you, human, you are the one who freed me, the one my people foretold." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing heavy on his soul. But the soldiers recovered, their leader raising his broken spear, shouting, "She must not live. Strike her down before she awakens the past." The army roared, moving forward again, their fear drowned in orders. The wasteland trembled with the march of steel and rage. The girl lifted her hands, energy crackling around her. She whispered almost to herself, "I can destroy them. I can burn them all. But if I unleash it fully, I may burn you too." The human stepped closer, his voice steady even in the storm. "Then trust me, we will face them together, whatever comes." The army closed in, the night alive with fire and thunder. The girl's light grew brighter, the human's grip on the metal rod tighter. Side by side they stood against the storm, human and Illyrian, weak and strong, fragile and eternal. The first clash shook the land, and in that clash, destiny was born. The story did not end there. It was only the beginning. The galaxy would hear of this night, of the human who stood when all others turned away, and of the alien girl whose chains were broken by his hands. What they became next was a secret still hidden in the shadows of tomorrow.